Have you ever wondered how Durand Eastman was formed? Come with us as Jack Butler, the author of the Durand Eastman Yesterday and Today, on this edition of our Second Tuesday Stories, Exploring Our Past.
The following is a production of the Greece Historical Society.
Second Tuesday Stories, Exploring Our Past, presented by the Greece Historical Society, are sponsored by members of the Greece Historical Society and our advertisers in the newsletter.
The space for the event is provided by the Greece Public Library. Please support your local library.
Durand Eastman Park, Yesterday and Today, presented by Jack Butler, recorded Tuesday, October 14th, 2025.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for joining us here at the Greece Public Library tonight. We have a great crowd. This is amazing. I just wanted to let you know of a couple programs that are coming up that have some openings. On October 16th from 2 to 3 o'clock, we have Tales from the Crypt, the Mausoleums of Mount Hope. And then we have an evening of music with a very dynamic woman. She does a kind of a contemporary folk music, blends a little bit of jazz in there. Her name is Kara Fink, and she's going to be performing here on October 22nd from 6:30 to 7:30, and we still have a lot of space for that show. It looks really good. Of course, they're always when I'm working, so I can never enjoy them, but hey. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the mic over to Linda. Deborah. Sorry, Deborah.
That's okay. I thought my mother was
Linda, Deborah.
Linda's my sister, and I always went by that, but my mother didn't know it was a part either. Good evening. I am Deborah Cole-Myers. I'm the Vice President of the Greece Historical Society, and I welcome you, and it's so good to see everybody here and ready to hear a great talk, which I believe we are going to hear. I just tell you a little bit about our speaker tonight. First, I got to put my glasses on. Okay. This talk is called The Surprising Story of Durand Eastman Park. Durand Eastman Park is one of the most picturesque green spaces in Monroe County. While most Rochesterians have heard of George Eastman, few people know about the park's other namesake, Dr. Henry Durand. But as it happens, the park was Durand's idea. This talk explores the fascinating life of Henry Durand, his relationship with George Eastman, and the much deeper, unexpected, and shocking twist that occurred after they donated their land to the city of Rochester. Join author Jack Butler as he discusses the creation and evolution of Durand Eastman Park. Raised in Irondequoit, Jack Butler co-authored Mendon Ponds Park, Fairchild's Dream, with Diane Ham in 2023. Butler decided to next research the origins of Durand Eastman Park. Its amazing history and promising future are covered in his book, Durand Eastman Park, Yesterday and Today, 2024. Now, without further ado, as they say, Mr. Jack Butler.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming out. This is, I've had some pretty good sized audiences, but this breaks the record. So, you're not allowed to throw anything, that's the first rule. And people way in the back, if you want to move your chairs and smush up or something like that, an awful lot of the presentation is going to be on the screen and what you can see. I'll try to cover as much as I can, but I'm sure you're going to have a very difficult time seeing parts of the screen here.
Jack?
Yes.
Speak up just a little bit more, please.
Okay, yeah, is that better? Okay, I normally don't speak this loud even at home. Okay, I would ask that everybody turn their cell phones either off or on to vibrate anyway, especially with a large crowd like this. There it is. Let's hold questions until the end. And I'm also a roamer when I present, so I'll be walking all around here, which will make it very difficult for a camera person.
We'll just be keeping it right on the PowerPoint.
Okay, that's good. All right.
That's the easy part.
So I'll start with a little bit of background. Actually, I'll start with this screen. But the Mendon Ponds Park book, Diane Ham and I wrote back in 2023. Diane is the town of Mendon historian now for the last 46 years. So Diane is about 80 something or other and sharp as a tack and She had written other smaller books about things that occurred in the town of Mendon. And so she kind of understood all the mechanics of writing a book. And so when she called me up in April of 2023 and said, why don't we write a book together? I was like, well, okay. So 6 months later, in October of 2023, we published this book, and it's still selling extremely well. And then it was actually the Durand Eastman Park book had a birthday this week. It was on Columbus Day of last year that I published this. Both books are published locally. We print them locally. We didn't have to go through Amazon. There was no value going through Amazon for a book about, something so local history based. So we published, edited them, did everything, printing locally, the binding is done locally, everything. So with that, let me get into a little bit of my background. I spent most of my career in medical diagnostics and medical devices, and I retired from that about 14 years ago. But most of my time in the medical world was spent in women's health. I helped launch the first human papillomavirus DNA-based test that detects the cause of cervical cancer. And I did that for about 8 years here in the States. And then after that, we launched the first of its kind FDA-cleared product for the early identification of lymphedema, which is a common comorbidity or side effect often of breast cancer. I retired from the medical industry about 14 years ago, started my own family-run business that I'm still operating today.
You want to take those lights off?
Oh, yeah. Can we turn the lights down somewhere?
Yes.
Thank you. And in 2021, I started doing what I call the Fairchild walking tours of Mendon Ponds Park. Mendon Ponds is the largest park in Monroe County. It's 2,700 acres. And there's no way you can do that in one tour. So I actually do 4 different walking tours of Mendon Ponds Park. Fairchild is a reference to Professor Herman Leroy Fairchild, who is the reason that Mendon Ponds Park is around today, just like Henry Durand is the reason that Durand Park is around today. Fairchild was the head of the geology department at the University of Rochester from 1880 to 1920. And he's the one that recognized how unique Mendon Ponds Park was because of its features of glacial recession from 13,000 years ago. So he was the one who petitioned the county government and the state to do something to preserve that. It started out 1,400 acres, but to preserve that land for future generations. So, in 2021, just before COVID, I started the Fairchild walking tours, and I still do those. I had 3 of them this week. And then in 2023, Diane and I did the Fairchild's Dream book, and then it was actually in July of 2024, I started the Durand Eastman book. And actually, truth be told, I didn't plan on writing this book. All I wanted to know, everybody in Rochester knows who Eastman is, and all I wanted to know is who is this guy Durand? And I had a lot of people tell me, oh, that's George Eastman's first name. No, I'm pretty sure it's George. And there was almost nothing on the internet about Henry Durand. There was about a 30-page paper or pamphlet or whatever with a little bit of history about Henry Durand. And then there was a term paper from a woman who was a U of R student, and she took a course called Talking Stones. And everybody who took the course walked through Mount Hope Cemetery, picked a grave, and then the course was basically about researching whose grave that was and find out as much as you can. And she randomly selected Henry Durand's. So her term paper is available on the internet. But that was about it. So there was a lot of original research that I had to do in this. And as you'll see as we get into the heart of the matter here, I used a lot of different sources. The people at the Durand Eastman, or the George Eastman House, were fantastically helpful. There's a gentleman there by the name of John Ellsbury, who's one of the archivists. He shares an office with Michelle Finn, who's the curator of the museum there. And he was really fantastic. A wonderful source of a lot of information that you'll see today. So I've been married 43 years. My lovely spouse is sitting here in the corner with me. We have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. That's me. This is the book. So these are two photographs. Actually, I take that back. There's only one photograph here. On the left, we have an oil painting of Dr. Henry Durand. That dates to about 1881 or so, and there's an inscription here on the bottom. But are there any Yale grads in the audience here? Really hard to see, but anyway, he attended Yale University. He was the one responsible for writing the lyrics to their alma mater called Bright College Days. If you know anybody who's attended Yale and you mention Bright College Days, they can stand up and sing it to you. And they still do that today. I have a friend who attended Yale, and when I told him about Henry Durand, and Bright College Days, he was like, oh, that's so into the Yale culture. But it was Henry Durand who wrote the lyrics for this, and this is an oil painting of him that I had to write Yale to get a copy of from their library. On the right there is a photograph of George Eastman taken when he was 39 years old, and he was in Paris at the time that was taken. Oddly enough, I am not aware and have never seen a photograph of these two gentlemen together. I don't think it exists, which is very strange because of some of the photographs that I have in the book. George Eastman took a photograph of Durand's house that he had in Durand Eastman Park. But there are no photographs that I'm aware of, nor is anybody at the George Eastman house aware of a photograph of Durand with George Eastman. Well, that's not good. There we go. Okay, so the book itself, I say, is kind of a book divided. Let me go back again and just make sure I didn't skip anything. Okay, it's a book divided because I didn't know anything about Henry Durand when I started, so the first thing I wanted to do was just kind of get a mental image of, all right, we all know George Eastman launching photography globally, and that preoccupied an awful lot of his time, but I set up a timeline here that went from about 1850, Eastman was 7 years older than Henry Durand. So I set up a timeline here from about the time Eastman was born, and every 5 years, and on this side I monitored what was Henry Durand doing at this point in his life, and on this side, what was George Eastman doing in his life, just to get a sense for one man's career versus the other. So that takes up about the first half of the book, literally. And then the second half of the book refers, I talk about this, what I call the 6 pillars of the park, and we'll get into those. But this is a really interesting Albert Stone photograph. Albert Stone was a black and white photographer. He worked for the Democrat and Chronicle and took a lot of photographs back in 1920s and 1930s. And I have a number of them in the book, and you'll see a number of them still in tonight's presentation, but I really liked this one because it brings in a number of elements. Some of you may be old enough to remember the original beach house. This is Lakeshore Boulevard here, this is Lake Ontario here, and that would be Durand Lake here. So the original beach house they ended up tearing down a number of years ago, but there's discussion about rebuilding it again. And I'll talk about that a little bit more before the end of tonight's presentation. This is known, has a number of different identities, but it was called the Refectory. The Refectory is a communal restaurant, essentially, because back in the day when the park first opened up, a lot of people would come all the way down from the city because this park, and Henry Durand knew this park gave city people access to Lake Ontario for like one of the first times, without having to cross people's property and all that. So the Refectory was a place that would provide shelter if they needed it, because it was probably a day trip for them to come down from the city, and it also provided food. That burned to the ground, and it was also known as the Three Lakes Pavilion. The Three Lakes being Ontario, Durand, and George Eastman Lake was over on this side. So it was also known as the Three Lakes Pavilion, and all it stands for of it right now is the stone wall underneath that everybody identifies with the White Lady Ghost and the White Lady's Castle. But that was the building. That's what was above that stone wall. And then, interestingly enough, this building here Must have been like a concession stand. And the first time I looked at this photograph, I didn't pay too much attention to it. But then on my next trip down to Durand, I thought, I wonder. And I walked over here, and the floor is still there. There's the linoleum tile floor that they had in this little concession stand there, and it's still there. So next time you go down there, check it out. There's not much else to see there, but you can go from there up to see the White Lady goes, wall and all of that. The photography in the book is, I think, spectacular. For the Mendon Ponds Park book, we used an awful lot of the photographs that I take myself because I've lived in the park, I've run in the park for 20 or 30 years. Our home today backs up into the park. So I had lots of photography about Mendon Ponds Park, but I didn't have as much, like almost nothing, about Durand Eastman Park. So I had the very good fortune of having 3 professional photographers contribute their work. David Gliacana, Jim Montanus. Is Jim here in the room by any chance?
I didn't see him.
Oh, okay, you know him? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jim and I have never met face to face. It's bizarre. I've tried to connect with him a number of times. But anyway, so, and John Greach. This is a photograph. What's really nice about, I think, the contribution of photography in this book, the photography is like head and heels above that of the Mendon Ponds Park book because of the spectacular work of these 3 gentlemen. This is, and they focus in on, their photography is slightly different from each other. David focuses in on wildlife, and he almost exclusively takes photographs of wildlife, and particularly birds in the park. Jim tends to do more landscapes, beautiful beaches and pictures of the lakes and magnificent clouds and all the saturated colors of reds and oranges and everything else that really pop in his photographs. So there's a Jim Montanus, very typical, taken in Durand Eastman. And then John Greach is an aerial photographer, so he takes photographs from his private plane at about 1,000 feet. And that's a photograph of his from over Lake Ontario during the wintertime. So their photography has added immensely to the, I think anyway, to the quality of the book. So we'll get going here. This is for the. How many have read the Durand Eastman Park book? Show of hands. All right, just a couple. Good. All right, so this will be new then, a lot of new information coming at you, but put on your seatbelts. This was a real surprise to me. So this is Maria Kilbourne Eastman, George Eastman's mother. His father died when he was about 8 years old. They lived at Waterville, which is like southeast of Syracuse, New York, halfway between Syracuse and Utica. If you went south, you'd see Waterville. And Eastman's father died when he was just 8 years old. And so he had 2 older sisters, I think, a younger sister and his mother, and he immediately took responsibility and stepped up to bat to try to financially help provide for the family. And wherever he was, as he was traveling around the world launching photography globally, he always stayed in touch with his mother, always. He always made sure she had a home, and usually a home in a very nice neighborhood, particularly once he became successful. Eastman actually started developing his first company out of her kitchen based upon his work with gelatins in her kitchen. And Eastman developed the dry plate technology, and his first company was called Eastman Dry Plate. And so he was working in Mom's kitchen. He never married, but as he traveled anywhere around the world, he would always, always stay in touch with his mother. This is obviously a photograph that of George Eastman at Mendon Ponds Park. And all right, close by. But this was a spectacular photograph, I thought. I had never seen it before, but this came out of the archives at the George Eastman House. And you would never catch me dead standing that close to the edge. I don't know about any of you, but Very interesting. So when this guy inhaled, they have it documented. When he exhaled, they have it documented. It was incredible, the depth of the notes, the letters, the files, the photographs, everything that they have at the George Eastman house stored away. They allowed me, if I asked them for specific documents or whatever, they'd go into a back room and 10 minutes later they'd come out with a folder and they'd hand it to me and allow me to look at it. But his life was so well documented. I'll share one such document with you. This was really kind of an interesting letter dated St. Patrick's Day of 1930. And the gentleman writes here, "Dear Mr. Eastman, I want to thank you so much for your letter of March 14th, giving me information regarding the way in which you handle beggar letters. Beggar letters are letters from people asking you for money if you're wealthy." I didn't know that, but that's what it is. It said, "It was awfully good of you to take the time the trouble to answer it personally, and I appreciate it very much." Signed, John D. Rockefeller. So this is the kind of stuff they have, I had access to. So when I saw this letter, I felt like I should put on white gloves or something. But they just have so much information there about Eastman's life. It's really a fantastic resource. So this is called the Beers map. It's an 1874 map of Irondequoit. And I'll just point out a couple of things. Unfortunately, I think this works there, but it won't work on the screen. So I'll have to just kind of point. But this is, give you some perspective. Obviously, Lake Ontario there, Irondequoit Bay here. Greece is somewhere over there. And this is Woodsman Road right here. Woodsman Road we know today as Culver Road. But back in 1874, it was Woodsman Road. And off of it, we can see that, we'll start up here. That's Sherry Road. James and John Sherry had their farm right here. Today that's known as Pine Grove Avenue. And over here we have what was known as, it'll come to me. Hold on a second. Hogsback Road. And Hogsback Road is today what we call King's Highway. And there's a story that if we had more time I could tell you, but there were two families named King. Or actually, there was one gentleman whose name was King, and he owned two houses or two pieces of property very close to the Irondequoit Town Hall. And somewhere along the way, then they ended up changing the name from Hogsback Highway, which is kind of an ugly sounding, and I won't want that on an envelope, to King's Highway. And then Hoffman lived here. Hoffman Hills area was developed in here. And then this is Zoo Road, or it's Zoo Road. This is Wiesner Road. And Adam and Christine Wiesner had a 211-acre farm right here. And I know that because Justin Wiesner is the fire marshal here in the town of Greece. So I met with Justin, and he had an awful lot of information. He was really fascinated that, we were going to be writing, or I was going to be writing a book about Durand Eastman Park. So it's actually Wiesner Road. It's not Wisner Road. It's not Weisner Road. It's Wiesner Road. So this gives you a perspective in 1874, and I'll contrast that in a moment. So Dr. Henry Strong Durand, he attended Yale University. He was actually the sixth member of his family to attend Yale. So the Durands were doing okay. They were smart. And there was money behind them. I don't really know where the money came from, but they held education in that was high esteem. It was really very important for Durand's father that all of his children received the very best educations he could get. So he went to Yale and graduated in the class of 1881. And then he went on, after graduating from Yale, he took 5 months off to travel to Europe and just tool around Europe for a ways. And that kind of is significant because Durand likes adventure, as it turns out. And you'll see that as we move along here. So he takes 5 months off to go to Europe, and then he comes back, goes to Harvard Medical School, and graduates with his degree in surgery, and returns to Rochester. He lived at 87 South Fitzhugh Street, and even while he was attending Yale, he kept the address there at 87 South Fitzhugh Street. So I thought, well, geez, he must have really liked that place, and it must have been a spectacular property. So I went to visit it, and I found myself standing in the middle of 490. Right by the Civic Center garage. It's not there any longer. South Fitzhugh Street, if you turn onto South Fitzhugh Street off of, I think it's off of Broad or something, it goes up to like number 57, and then you have the Civic Center parking garage, and then behind that is 490, and then South Fitzhugh starts up again in the Cornhill area. But it starts off up again at like address number 123 or something like that. So it was sometime, I think, back when they built the interstate highways, maybe in the 50s or 60s, that they ended up tearing down 87 South Fitzhugh. But it looked like a really lovely, it is a lovely neighborhood. So Durand graduates from Harvard with his degree in surgery, and he returns to Rochester, sets up his practice at 87 South Fitzhugh. But he always wanted to have a summer home up on Lake Ontario. So in 1898, he buys the Wiesner Farm and some other properties, accumulating about, or amounting to about 270 acres of land on Lake Ontario, with about 1,000 feet of frontage on the lake. He built a house, he built a barn, he planted an apple orchard of about 63 trees by hand himself, and he convinces George Eastman to buy all the land around his, so that together, jointly, they could turn all of that land over to the city of Rochester for a park for the people. Not for groups, not for organizations, not for companies, a park for the people. He was adamant and very explicit about that in the deeds when they turned the property over to the city of Rochester. So, that was the origin of the land, and it was about, as you can see on this 1902 map here, you can see where it says Henry Durand's, at that point he had 165 acres of land, and then Ludwig Mengel's farm was bought up by George Eastman, that a lot property was bought by Eastman, the Huntington property, some of these others around here. So between Durand and Eastman, they turned over 484 acres of land to the city of Rochester in 1907. So, Durand is, where did the two of them meet? Well, we're not 100% sure, but they traveled in the same social circles, absolutely for sure. They both were members of the Rochester Yacht Club. They were both members of the Genesee Valley Club, GVC. They both belonged to the Country Club of Rochester together. So they traveled, in spite of their 7-year age difference, they traveled in the same social circles, without a doubt. But it was one evening at the Genesee Valley Club that Durand meets this guy by the name of Albert Stillwell. And Albert Stillwell tells Henry Durand all about the riches and the adventure to be had in Mexico, where he could mine gold and silver, or actually own mines that were mining gold and silver. And so Durand didn't head off immediately, but in 1908, he closes up his medical practice, and he heads for this place called Irondequoit, Mexico. So here in the background is that's Texas, and the Texas-Mexican border going all the way over to California. And here's Irondequoit, where he decides he's going to head. So he must have taken a train from Rochester here all the way down somewhere into Texas, and then probably went in by horse and buggy, but the last 30 miles he had to go in by donkey, because this little town of Irondequoit was very, very, very small. It was at the base of a 3,000-foot mountain, and it was just this tiny little community, and how or why he chose that, I have no idea. But he arranges a house prior to his arrival, and he's got a housekeeper as soon as he arrives in Irondequoit. And the next morning, his first morning there, he wakes up and there's 23 patients lined up around his house. Word had already gotten out that there was a U.S. doctor of all places coming down here to Uruguay, Mexico. The closest physician was 250 miles away. So he had to take up it once again. Although he thought he was going to go down and find adventure and mine gold and silver and all that stuff, he took up again his Hippocratic oath, and he immediately started delivering babies, delivering all the health care. He was the veterinarian. He took care of people's monkeys, boa constrictors, all of it. If it had to do with health, Henry Durand was there. He paid for and had shipped down there vaccines, bandages, Band-Aids, medicines, virtually anything he needed to keep the people of Uruguay healthy. So this guy, in my feeling anyway, is a real mensch, right? He's a really good man deep down and personally. And he, therefore, obviously becomes very beloved by this little tiny local community of Uruguay. At the bottom here, you see the reference to Santa Claus. His first year down there, he convinced, or he had some men in the community go up into the mountains and bring down a large-sized pine tree. And he managed to hide it behind some cloth or sheeting or something like that. And he decorated it with bandages that he had draped and cotton balls that he hung on hooks, things like that. And 4 days before Christmas, gifts arrived for all the children of the village of Uruguay. So that, and he did that every year he was down in Uruguay. So that's in my estimation. And the book gets into a lot more detail about Durand and his life and his college days and all that stuff. But all of it really supports that he was a really, I think, fundamentally good person and a great sense of humor. And he was a poet. And so it was quite an interesting endeavor, I think, for Durand and what he got down there. However, in 1915, this is where you have to tighten your seatbelts. In 1915, he returns home to Rochester, and he's rather shocked. He comes to, because he's got some business interests here, and he wants to tell his friends and family all about what's going on in Mexico and his adventures down there and everything. And he finds that his summer home in the park has been taken over by the city of Rochester. They cut down his apple orchard, the 63 trees. They tore down his barn. They removed a fence. They tore down an old log cabin that was on the property that some of his caretakers used to live in. And they did this because the person who headed the park commission at that point, the city parks, decided that his 20 acres of land that he kept for lifetime personal use before leaving for Mexico, he and George gave 484 acres of land. Durand kept only 20 acres of land for lifetime personal use. And the person heading up the Parks Department decided that 20 acres was the best place to build a zoo. So he comes up here and he's rather shocked, and he runs into Alexander Lamberton, who is the head of the Parks Commission.
Lamberton's
Familiar name? Yeah,
Conservatory.
it's the same one. And so he has, Henry Durand has his trust officer at Security Trust Company, for those who remember the days of Security Trust. I do, I used to work there. And he had his trust officer's name was William Stackle. And he had his trust officer get in touch with the city of Rochester because before he left, Durand talked to the people at the city parks department and said, hey, listen, I'm going to be gone for a while. I'm going down to Mexico. Watch my stuff. That was it. He didn't have any legal documents. He said, if you find tenants who you want to, are reputable and you want to give them access to staying in my home, you can do that and you can keep any income.
Wow.
All right? So he did everything just, on a word of mouth, a commitment between he and whoever at the city parks he was talking to. But, so he comes up in 1915 and finds, that they're, they've cut his apple orchard, tore down his barn, and all that stuff. So he has Stackle contact the city, and Stackle receives back on November 23rd of 1916, receives back this letter from Alexander Lamberton, Commissioner of Parks. I hereby advise you that the Department of the Parks for the City of Rochester does hereby assume control of the of the homestead of Dr. Henry Durand. I didn't expect that. I mean, I had no expectation to begin with because I didn't know who Durand was. But I'm a native Rochesterian, like probably many of you in this room, and I was just shocked.
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep nights. No, I really couldn't because it was like, wow, this is my city. They did this to him? Yeah, so I ended up meeting, I was so upset. I set up a luncheon meeting with Christine Radarski. Christine is the historian for the city of Rochester, and now she's historian for the county. And I sat down with her and I showed her, these letters that I had copies of and all the documentation behind it. And I said, Christine, what am I going to do? I'm writing a book about a park, but I feel like it's going to be the first book, banned by the city of Rochester, and it's just about a park. So this was extremely upsetting, but Christine said, listen, I can see what you've got here, and you just have to publish whatever you're comfortable publishing. So I thought, all right. And the following week, she went into City of Rochester files that were in old dusty file cabinets, and she emailed me copies of about 10 other additional documents that back up all of this. So thank you to Christine. So Durand ends up returning to Mexico because he ended up buying some mines down there, and he met his future wife, Harriet Durand. She had a daughter already by the name of Margaret. And they get down there just in time, and the Mexican Revolution is starting. And Durand knows he's got to get he and his family out of Mexico, because if the revolutionaries catch him, he ends up taking like a death oath with Harriet, that if they're caught by the revolutionaries, they'll kill each other and his daughter. So it was that bad. It took them 3 months traveling just at night with Harriet and Margaret, and they finally arrived in Southern California. So in the years subsequent to that, then, he briefly comes back to visit Rochester, because he still has family here. And, he was still trying to work through the city to get his land back. His daughter Margaret decides she wants to study voice. Well, the best place to study voice back in the early 1900s was going to be in Europe. So they go to Paris and Venice, and they end up moving to Paris. And whenever George Eastman is going through Europe, in pursuit of developing photography globally, he stops in to see his friend, Henry Durand. If he was going on safari down in Africa and he had to go through Paris or whatever, he'd stop in to see Henry Durand. So George Eastman didn't have too many, super tight friends, and I don't know that his friendship with Durand was so unique because, for example, Eastman didn't do anything when they took over his 20 acres of land to build the zoo. So, in fairness to George, he was probably traveling all around the world, and he may not have been even aware of it for quite a while. So Durand finally, in 1922, writes a very detailed 5-page letter to the Honorable Clarence Van Zandt, who is the city mayor at that point, and he details in a 4-page letter plus a map that accompanied it. He details exactly how he came about buying up the property and getting George Eastman in, to buy property all around his, and they gave it to the city, and how before he left for Mexico, he had a verbal agreement with the city who was going to watch his stuff and all that, So it's very detailed. I typed up all 4 pages of this letter in the book, just so people didn't have to try to make out the typewritten page there, but word by word. And quite interestingly, in about page 4, he makes reference that he says, oh, but by the way, I own the Sara Lee property and some other properties around the park. And he doesn't say anything else about it. He just I own that. And so it's kind of like a dangling participle or something. It's like, okay. So he just leaves that hanging, and he includes an invoice for the loss of his barn, the removal of his fence, cutting down his apple orchard, and he charges them $50 a month for the land that they built the zoo on. The city never paid the invoice, obviously. So in Paris, Henry Durand develops myocarditis, and he ends up dying in 1929. He is buried in Mount Hope Cemetery, as you'll see momentarily. And a lot of people, maybe everybody knows the story of George Eastman, dying in 1932. He was entertaining guests at the mansion one night, said he had to go upstairs, write a memo. He went upstairs, wrote a memo. Dear friends, my work here is completed, why wait? And signed it George, and shot himself in the heart with an automatic pistol. That was George's demise. This is what the Democrat and Chronicle looked like the next day. And the DNC would not be used as photographed in the book. They wanted some absurd amount of money for me to even show this. So I know. It's like, it's almost 100 years old.
Yep, it's
Yeah, well, how much of a budget do you have, Mr. Butler? 0. So anyway. So the surprising thing here is that, all right, so if you go to Mount Hope Cemetery, you can see the Durand plot. There's actually 3 plots that the Durand family has in there. And this is one of the 3 plots. It says Durand here. This is where Henry's buried. This is where Harriet is buried, his mother, his father. And you can see just a little bit of the corner here of where his brother John was buried. He also had a younger sister by the name of Mary Durand. And Mary's is in the same area, but in a separate plot. Mary was Dr. Durand's youngest daughter, his youngest sister. He ended up giving her away when she got married to a Dr. Edward Mulligan. Dr. Edward Mulligan was born in Canada, and he was apparently one of the brightest and smartest of he was a surgeon also, and he ended up moving to Rochester and coincidentally became George Eastman's personal physician. So here's Mary Durand, married to the personal physician of George Eastman, and Mary would entertain when George had big parties at the George Eastman mansion and everything. Mary would be the hostess, essentially. Mary and Dr. Edward Mulligan and all of their children are buried in a plot right next door to this one. Conversely, this is where George Eastman was buried, as many of you may realize, but this is Driving Park. He said, this is not where he wanted to be buried. He wanted to be buried with his mother, Maria Kilbourne, and his father, who died when he was 8 years old. And his niece, upon his death, convinced the city of Rochester, along with the support, I guess, of Eastman Kodak's board or whatever, that his first love was really Eastman Kodak Company, so he should remain here and not be buried with his family in Waterville. So this is a lovely area. There's really not much of a parking lot, if anybody's ever been there, but George's ashes are right under here. There's not a lot of parking, but it's a nice site, but it's definitely, George Eastman did not intend to be buried there. Yeah. So this is kind of where it becomes interesting also. So while in Paris, no doubt, Durand and Harriet had many discussions about what they were going to do with the remaining land that they owned around Lake Ontario there. And specifically that Sarah Lee property, that 10-acre parcel, the Sarah Lee property. And Harriet writes a letter to the city of Rochester. Let's see if I got a date on this. I don't here, but I think it was 1932, if I remember correctly. It's around the same time as Eastman died. And it was very likely that they had discussed what they were going to do with the Sarah Lee property. And the letter says that Harriet is donating the Sarah Lee property to the city of Rochester as an addition to the Durand Eastman Park. But she says the gift is conditional, that I may be permitted at some convenient future date to erect a suitable memorial gateway at the east entrance to the park, which would be the Sweet Fern Drive, like right across from the Parkside Diner. right? That was the main entrance then, and really still is now. But that she may erect this memorial gateway at the east entrance to the park in memory of Dr. Henry Durand, and to place there 2 bronze plaques affixed to boulders and inscribed with the history of the park. Well, this was the reply she got from Stephen Story in 1931. All right, so the letter must have been 31. So this is the letter she gets in return from Stephen Story, who's the city manager for the city. Thanks, Harriet, for the Sara Lee property. And he says, I know how deeply hurt he, meaning Henry Durand, was at the attitude of former city officials who felt disposed to ride roughshod over his wishes with regards to the development of the park. The people of the city of Rochester are exceedingly grateful for this gift. They never put the bronze plaques mounted to boulders on Sweetfern. Strike 2 against our dear city of Rochester. So this was also most unexpected. Prior to publishing the book a year ago, I thought, well, I better go in and at least warn the people at City Hall that I'm writing this book. Not that they could do much about it. I mean, they couldn't do anything about, the 20 acres of land that they took from Henry Durand for lifetime personal use and everything. But I thought, well, this is something they could do something about. So I was meeting with her at City Hall with the environmental services people. They're the ones that right now have been doing the first stages of a project related to rebuilding the bathhouse. If you've been along Lakeshore Boulevard, they've been putting in stairways down to the beach from those various parking lots where we used to watch the submarine races. Good, you're with me. So most of those parking lots now actually have stairs down to the beach, and the westernmost of them actually has a handicap ramp also that goes down to the beach now. So they just finished that up. They're behind schedule. The next phase of the whole thing is that they're going to seek approval with complementary or matching funds from hopefully the state, and they want to rebuild the beach house. And the beach house that they're talking about, they just over a year ago at Camp Eastman during the summer, they talked about it for the first time, and they showed 3 proposed architectural drawings of what that would look like. So anyway, I went into City Hall and I had a meeting with the guy in environmental services who's involved with these projects. And we were in a great big meeting room, and I was showing them the documentation and the letter from Stephen Story and all this stuff, and all of a sudden we get this, hey, we have the room. So some group was coming in after us who said, they had reserved the room that we were meeting in. So Tyler is the guy's name. I walk out of the room with Tyler, and the new group comes in. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm just talking. I wrote a book about Durand Eastman Park. Oh, fantastic park. What are you guys talking about? And I said, "Well, there's this matter here that the city didn't do some things they said they were going to do." And this woman says, "Well, I'm the head of finance. If you ever need anything." But you got a second. So I have a verbal commitment now. I've actually written a language for the plaques. And I have a verbal commitment from the city that they're going to have these 2 bronze plaques with the history of the park that I've written, and I'll probably have Christine Radarski review those. And we hope to have those mounted on some large boulders right across the street, essentially, from the Parkside Diner. And that will hopefully take place in 2026, in the spring. So there should be a ribbon cutting ceremony. But prior to coming here tonight, I asked, it's been about a year now that I've been having this discussion with them about putting these bronze plaques on 2 boulders. And so I asked them a week ago for an update on how are things looking? Are we on the city manager? Malik Evans is our City of Rochester mayor. I said, are we on his agenda for the spring yet? Have we had to, do we know how long it's going to take to get boulders or bronze plaques and all that? And I didn't get anything back. So I'm a little concerned about that. It's not going to keep me up nights. But if anybody is so inclined, And of course, the next day or week or month or something, we don't all have to,
But you
get on.
do know it's election.
Yeah, tomorrow, but just info@cityofrochester.gov, or the phone number for Mayor Evans' office apparently is 438-7045. So I collectively invite you to apply some group pressure. So that's the first half of the book, really, is about that whole thing that occurred with Henry Durand and George Eastman. And then the second half of the book is really about what I refer to as the 6 pillars of the park, which are the Arboretum. And Arboretum is just a living tree museum. And Durand Eastman Park had one of the top 3 arboretums in the whole country back in the 1920s and 30s. It was Highland, Durand Eastman Park, and the Arboretum, which is owned by Harvard in Boston. So world class, but it's fallen into kind of a state of disrepair, very sadly these days. Lack of budgets, lack of arborists, people that really know. Although most of the trees down there in the Arboretum still have the genus and species wrapped around, somewhere on the trunk so you can see what they are. So the Arboretum is absolutely, positively one of the pillars of the park. The beach house that was torn down in the early 60s. The zoo used to be, this is an old Albert Stone photograph, again, up here of an elephant. I remember going there once when I was about this high. And, they had some amazing animals there. By the way, all of the animals that were in the Durand Eastman Zoo were paid for personally by Lamberton. That's interesting, yeah. And I think what really went on there, Lamberton was not, I don't mean to paint Lamberton as a really bad guy, he wasn't. He did a lot of really bright and interesting and innovative things with parks here in the city of Rochester. He was one of the first people to have people play music and concerts and things like that in parks. He did a lot of things around the city. But for some reason, he just didn't like Henry Durand. He had it out for Henry Durand, and I could never get to the bottom of why that was. Anyway, so the zoo also was taken down in the early 1960s, the refectory. This is all that is left today of the White Lady Castle. So the refectory itself was up here above that foundation. And then you have the golf course, and for all the golfers here in the room, you probably know that the original golf course at Durand Eastman Park was a Donald Ross course. They say that there are 5.5 Donald Ross courses here in the Rochester area. For those of you who aren't golfers, Donald Ross is like the big name, one of the big names in golf courses anywhere around the globe. But Donald Ross flew into Rochester, looked at the Durand Eastman area and said, geez, with the drainage problems and everything else, the hills and valleys down there, he could only envision a 9-hole golf course. So that's why it's the half of 5.5 Donald Ross golf courses here in Rochester. However, this young upstart by the name of Robert Trent Jones stepped up to the bat around, I think it was 1916, 17, or maybe 1930, somewhere in that time frame. And he said, I can add another 9 holes onto this. And so he did. And all the holes that Donald Ross knew or thought he couldn't build, golf holes on because of too much water and moisture when it rained and flooding and all that stuff, Donald Ross was really right. But the golf course is still there, and it's a wonderful asset to the park. And then you have all the trails and shelters as well. And the soapbox derby. I had forgotten about this. And as I was finishing up writing the book and everything, I thought, geez, I remembered that there used to be the soapbox derby down there. So I Googled soapbox derby. And I got the name Mark Scolari. Yeah. Scolari. And so I called up Mark and said, listen, I'm writing this book about Durand Eastman Park, and I thought I'd include a paragraph about the soapbox derby. And he goes, paragraph? You're going to write a paragraph about the soapbox derby? He says, you got to write a chapter. Well, I'm running out of space, and it's a long book. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, Mark, why don't you write the chapter, and I'll edit it. And so about 3 weeks later, I got this chapter on the soapbox derby from him, and I edited. He did a really good job, and there's a number of funny points in the book, and the soapbox derby story is one of them. He really did a great job with it, and that still goes on as today, as many of you probably know. All my slides are skewed here. Sorry about that, but this slide just basically goes to how the Arboretum, unfortunately, in recent years, for a variety of reasons, has kind of lost some of its world-class nature. This is a snowball viburnum that is totally being crowded out now by other invasive species and things like that in the park. So, but you'll find trees in that park that you won't find like almost anywhere else in the United States, just because of the microclimates that you find there, because of the hills and its closeness to the lake and all of that. So the Arboretum is overgrown, the zoo's gone, the beach house is gone, the refectory's gone, we're short of money in the county, we're short of staff, and we're short of expertise to fix things like the Arboretum. Although I think it could be fixed, the county would have to find monies to dedicate to restoring it. And that would be a wonderful thing for them to do, as long as they're spending money on new beach houses, which isn't a certainty. If they end up getting matching funds from the state, it won't be until between 2028 and 2030 that the new beach house would be constructed. Whoop. So this is the original beach house. You can see it was very Romanesque with its urns and columns and all that stuff, and it was quite a sizable building, as you can see there. This is what they proposed as 3 different new architectural designs for it. The top one over here is very kind of similar in its Romanesque somewhat appearance. This one is referred to as the canopy, so the beach and the lake are out here. And then that one is referred to as the hill. And this is probably my favorite of them, so that would be Lakeshore Boulevard going by on that side and Lake Ontario out here. So no certainty that a new beach house will be constructed, but if they get matching funds and everything, by 2030, we could end up seeing a new beach house down there. These are some more Albert Stone photographs of the zoo, which I find really fascinating. So if you went down Wiesner Road, obviously they put a great big berm at the end of Wiesner Road, and they renamed the part of Wiesner Road that was near Henry Durand's property. They renamed that Zoo Road once they put in the zoo there. And they had all these pens here, but at the top of the hill there is essentially where Zoo Road goes by. And the Durand Eastman Park has their maintenance offices kind of like back over in this area these days. But when you go by there, it looks very different now because there's so many more trees have grown into that space and everything. But that's what it looked like in the day. And these are Himalayan mountain goats. And I haven't figured out how that guy gets up there, nor can I figure out how he gets down. Because he's got to weigh as much as I do. And it's just incredible to me that obviously they jump from post to post to get up and get down, but they have some pretty precision jumping skills, I guess. Yeah, so really interesting Albert Stone photographs. We can skip this because I've given presentations now at most of the libraries and all sorts of other places around the city on this topic. This is almost the second last slide. So I have a whole bunch of different bookstores. Unfortunately, the Barnes & Noble here in Greece refuses to carry the book.
We will be willing to carry it.
Because they don't carry books by local authors. Yeah. So, but I have books at all the other Barnes & Nobles in Pittsford and Eastview and Webster, LOB and REI, the Parkley, Pittsford Dairy, Book Culture, a whole bunch of other places. But and some in Irondequoit, Genrix, Sips Coffee House, Prima's Food Market. And I highlight just one because it's kind of a fun story. The Titus Tavern is owned by John Giel. And I called up John and said, "Hey, John, what would you think about carrying the book there?" He goes, "Well, I don't know how many of my customers read." Let's give some of them. So I left him with 5 books. So I went to deliver the books on a Friday evening, And I got there, and the place was jammed. Everybody was like this. It was wall-to-wall people in the Titus Tavern. And it turns out that it was one of their bartenders' 50th birthday party. He wasn't there yet, and it was a surprise birthday party for him. So it was jammed. There was one seat at the bar. And so I walked over to it, and I asked the guy on the left, I said, is anybody sitting here? And he said, no, yeah, go ahead. And I asked the guy on the right, anybody sitting here? He said, no, go ahead, it's all yours. So I sat down, John came over from behind the bar, I ordered a Guinness, I gave him 5 copies of my book, and the guy over here goes, what was that all about? I said, well, I just wrote a book about Durand Eastman Park. He goes, oh, that's a fantastic park. He says, I live just up the street from it. I said, oh, really? Whereabouts? He says, I live off of Pine Grove Avenue. I said, wow, really? I said, I was raised off of Pine Grove Avenue on 43 Poppy Street. He said, that's my house. True story. His jaw dropped, my jaw dropped. So, yeah, that's my small world story. Yeah, I should write a book, right. Good idea. So I'll finish up here with Jim Montana's photograph. You know, if you take photographs of any park here in the Rochester area, any of them, and show it, you'd have a hard time knowing which park it was a picture of. Except this part of Durand Eastman Park, the bridge there is quite unique and comes quite alive with Jim's style. This is another John Greaves photograph of Lake Ontario out in front of the park during the wintertime. And then this is a cedar waxwing that David took a picture of. I mean, you can almost reach out and touch that bird. So just phenomenal photography throughout the book by Jim and David and John. And this was a fairly recent photograph that David took of an American eagle there with breakfast in his claws there. So, can we turn off the lights for a second? I'll take any questions anybody has. Yes, ma'am. Okay, well, her question was, she doesn't know the story of the white lady.
Can I help with this? We want to hear your questions and get it on the video, please. So just raise your hand. I'll bring the mic to you. Okay? Who
was the one that was asking about the white lady?
This lady right here. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
I just said I really don't know the story of the white lady. I mean, I've heard it mentioned for years, but I don't know the story.
Okay. So the story of the white lady ghost is on that red plaque in front of that stone wall. If you go down Lakeshore Boulevard, you have that stone wall. It's right across from where the bathhouse used to be, and it's in between, essentially, Durand Lake and Lake Eastman. And it has the story there. It's considered folklore, but some people believe it's true. But it's they say that whoever lived in the building that was above that brick wall, oh, thank you. Yeah, here it is. Whoever lived in the building, they said she lost her child. Her child was lost in the park, and so she wanders around the park now at night. Her ghost wanders around with her 2 dogs. It says, grieving woman's ghost and her wolf-like hounds appear in the night midst, searching this roadside for her lost daughter. So this is a Pomeroy plaque, and Pomeroy plaques are very kind of difficult to get the Pomeroy Foundation to financially support and put there, but that's the story of the white lady ghost. I have some people, the people in the park say, oh, complete folklore, never happened. I mean, that was a refectory, it was a restaurant up there. Yeah, it was. But I have other people, I have a neighbor not too far from my home, and when I told him I was writing a book on the Durand Eastman Park, he said, white lady ghost. I said, yeah, white lady ghost. He said, no, he said, it's true. He said, bring out a Bible, I'll swear on the Bible. He said, I was with my girlfriend, we were laying on the beach, it was a Friday night, it was kind of getting on in the evening. I thought, all right, you don't have to get into any details. I got the idea. He says, I'm lying on the beach with my girlfriend, and all of a sudden, a woman comes walking out of the water. Walks right past us, doesn't say anything, doesn't look down, and he says, honest to God, that happened. And it's like, all right, well, if you say it happened, whatever. But, yeah, a couple Budweisers and whatever else, a couple ounces later. More questions? Way in the back. Oh, this
There's
gentleman.
one right here. Okay.
It'll work its way to back.
Is the Strong and Henry Strong Museum or Durand the Strong of the Strong Memorial Hospital? Is there any connection?
None that I could find. It is very interesting that the president, George Eastman, started Eastman Dry Plate Company, and the first president of Eastman Dry Plate Company was a man by the name of Henry Strong. And he was the Strong of the Strong family, but Durand and his family, they were actually born in Ohio. His dad worked for the railroad, and he ended up getting sent here to Rochester, working for whichever railroad he worked for. But as far as I could find, there was no connection between the infamous Strong family and Strong Memorial Hospital and all of that, and the Henry Strong Durand. And his mother's maiden name was Stewart.
We got a lady back here? Okay.
Did you bring any books with you today?
Yes, yeah, we have books up front here for anybody that's interested afterwards.
What is the,
The books are $24.99, so I owe you a penny if you buy one.
$25?
But we have a bunch of those, and we also brought along some of the Mendon Ponds Park books.
Have you ever run across the name Walter Carnahan?
No.
Well, it's an interesting story. Walter Carnahan was a local real estate developer investor. And Walter Carnahan was astute enough that he checked the tax roll. And at one time, Walter Carnahan bought up the tax account
Okay, I know who you're
for
talking
all
about.
of Durand Eastman Beach.
Yeah. Well, not all of it, but a
good
lot
part
of
of
it. Yeah.
I'm surprised it doesn't come out.
Yeah.
Connected with Mr. Carnegie? No?
Okay. Your last name isn't Carnegie. Yeah, I had forgotten his last name, but yeah, he went to court in the city because of back taxes and said he bought that, like George Eastman. Henry Durand owned about 1,000 feet of frontage on the lake, and George Eastman, through his other acquisition, owned about another 4,000 feet. So between them, they had a mile of beachfront there. But the gentleman you're talking about said that there were past due tax bills or something on it, and he bought for spare change or something, and ended up having to go to court, and the court didn't decide in his favor, so it stayed in the hands of the city.
He got a good payment of it.
Yeah, he probably did, you know.
Anybody else? Yes?
We'll get to you next.
I understand that there was an arborist by the name of Bernard Slavin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, could you speak to what he did and
Sure, yeah,
how
love
long
to.
he was there and so forth?
Yep. Yeah. If everybody can hear me, we won't have to worry about moving that back and forth. So there's a book by Alvin Grant, I think his name is. He was formerly a supervisor for the park, the city parks. City parks used to be separate from county parks. And the city parks included Durand because it's technically in the city of Rochester and the land was given to the city of Rochester even though it was in Irondequoit. And then you have Highland and some of the other city parks. So this book talks about the Plantsmen of Rochester. That's the title of it. You could probably find it here at the library. The Plantsmen of Rochester, and it goes to who are the Plantsmen of Rochester? Well, the Plantsmen of Rochester, John Dunbar was considered the first of them. He came over from Ireland in the late 1800s, 1890s or something, and he was a really great arborist and had an awful lot of interest in developing seeds and new types of plants. And then after Barney Slavin is the man who also had similar interests, and the county hired originally Barney Slavin's younger brother Patrick to begin planting the Arboretum at Durand Eastman Park. And apparently the county very quickly realized that this was way over Patrick's head, but Barney Slavin ended up doing all of that. And there's controversial stories about how many trees he actually planted. Some sources, for example, at the George Eastman House, John Ellisby gave me documents that show that Barney Slavin, claims that Barney Slavin planted 500,000 trees there. But I personally interviewed at least 6 past supervisors of the park, and they say, impossible. With the length of time and the, that you have to plant trees and how many plants you can plant and everything, they said maybe he planted 250,000 trees. Still a lot of trees, and he brought them in from all across the world, but that was Barney Slavin. And then the third gentleman, his name was Dick Venetia, and Dick Venetia was ultimately sent out to Mendon Ponds Park. And there was actually a tree nursery out at Mendon Ponds Park that almost nobody knows is there. It's got to be 20 acres large. But those three gentlemen, Dunbar, Bernie Slavin, and Venetia, are considered the plantsmen of Rochester. But they're really the people that helped turn Rochester from the flour city, like gold medal flour,
Right.
FLOUR, because of the grinding that would take place by the mills by the fall, to the flour city. Because of all the work they did on making Rochester a center for hybridizing new plants and new types of trees and shrubs and lilacs, and we were a seed capital and everything. So those three people are really the ones who are responsible for Rochester being known as the flower city today. But Bernie Slavin, if you go on Zoo Road, just past the Magnolia collection, there's the Slavin collection of trees. It's a small area. Both, well, they'd fit in this room, the two of them. But they have signs on them, and there's a rock there with Bernie Slavin's name on it and the dates of his birth and death. He's not buried there. It's just a commemoration that they put a rock there with his name on it.
You got a question?
Yeah, I know. Isn't that horrible?
I have a question. The existing ponds and the topography of the area, was that natural, or was it developed by the park systems after they acquired the land?
Yeah, no, that's another really great question. So there were 4 streams. If we went back to the Beers map, the 1884 Beers map that I showed originally, there were 4 streams that ran south to north into Lake Ontario. And Henry Durand personally dammed up one of them to form Trot Lake and Durand Lake. And they did the same thing with another stream that ended up becoming Eastman Lake. And so the topography, as far as the waterways go, they dammed up some of those streams, and that's why you have Durand Lake and Eastman Lake where they are. And interestingly enough, they apparently, Durand and Eastman had a conversation like, well, which one do you want named after you? And they decided that the one closest to Henry Durand's house on Zoo Road should be the one that they call Durand Lake. So that's how they happened to decide, which one was going to be named what. The rest of the topography there is very different from Mendon Ponds Park. Mendon Ponds Park was formed by the recession of the glaciers 13,700 years ago. And regression of glaciers leaves different glacial features than the advance of glaciers. When a glacier recedes, it leaves its 3 primary geographic features are kettles, cames, and eskers. And so on my walking tours, I take people into the park so they can see what a kettle is and a came and an esker, and I won't get into that now. But Durand Eastman Park was formed by a completely different process because, as I'm sure everybody knows, Lake Ontario at one point extended up to Ridge Road. And then Kings Highway used to be known as Hog's Back. Well, all of the area, the hilly, kind of rough hillsides that run more or less south to north to the lake and Lakeshore Boulevard, those are all hogbacks, or what are called Hog's Backs. And they're just hills that were formed by the erosion as Lake Ontario receded from the Ridge Road to its present location.
The Genesee River never flowed in that area.
No, wow, you're hitting on all the high spots here. No, actually, but back again to Mendon Ponds Park, the Genesee River used to run through Mendon Ponds Park before the glaciers. And when the glaciers came, they dumped so much sand and gravel in the area of Mendon Ponds Park that it actually ended up rerouting the Genesee River. The Genesee River used to flow over into like Irondequoit Bay. But when the glaciers receded, they dropped so much sand and gravel, it ended up actually forcing the rerouting of the Genesee River to its current course. So if it weren't for the glaciers, the city of Rochester wouldn't have been there because they wouldn't have built mills and all that stuff at the 3 different falls in the city.
That's about our time tonight, folks. But Jack, thank you so much. It was fascinating. Thank all of you for coming.
Want to subscribe to the Greece Historical Society on YouTube? Then click that subscribe button below. Click on that bell icon to get notified when there's new content available from the Greece Historical Society.
You can visit us on the web at GreeceHistoricalSociety.org. You can find us on Facebook at Greece Historical Society, and you can stop in at the Greece Historical Society at 595 Long Pond Road.